Started. I'm going to talk with you a little bit about how to do apologetics with gentleness and respect. You're learning a lot of the what about apologetics at this conference, what we believe, and what we can share with other people, some amazing content from some amazing speakers, which I just have to say, I'm so blessed. I feel very privileged to be able to share the stage with some amazing speakers. I've been very blessed by just listening to them. Of course, I'm always blessed listening to my husband speak. I think he's a genius, but I'm not biased, am I? But I'm very privileged to be able to be up here and to speak with them. But I think because of my background as a lawyer and as a mediator, I'm always about putting it into practice. Let's make this very practical for you. So I want to talk with you a little bit about the how to do apologetics. And you've got this cute little lion here, but this is based on a famous verse that you've already heard John allude to, and I think perhaps Dr. Howe and Mike as well, from 1 Peter 3:15. Which says, "But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect." How many of you, before you came to this conference, knew what apologetics meant? Okay, not many. I think that that's important for us to know. As speakers, often we go to these conferences and we start talking about apologetics without even defining the word. John did mention that this word apologetics comes from a Greek word apologia, which is used here in this verse, 1 Peter 3:15. It's used elsewhere as well, but I'm going to focus on this one verse here in this particular topic. The word that is underlined there, answer, it's been translated apologia to answer here. But it also means to give a defense. This word apologia is a courtroom word, talking about giving an argument, persuading other people to the truth. And so it is a courtroom term, and so I guess we kind of like it as lawyers to be able to use these courtroom terms. So we come from the world of apologetics back in the U.S. We do a lot of apologetics conferences. And no, it's not an apology. We're not apologizing for being Christians. We're actually just giving people reasons why we think Christianity is true. It is more than just your testimony, although your testimony is powerful. Your testimony is good. You heard Mike give an amazing testimony, but he said even as he went into these chat rooms and gave his testimony, people were challenging him on, well, why is your testimony any different from someone of a different religion or a different faith who has a testimony? Well, we, as Christians, can say that we have evidence to believe that Christianity is true. Not only did it change my life, but also is true. It is based on facts and evidence that you can actually check out. It is different from any other faith, any other religion in the world. But when I hear people talk about apologetics, they often just cite the middle part of this verse here. Be prepared to give an answer. Be prepared to give a reason why you believe Christianity is true. And they kind of forget the first and the last part of this verse, which I think are just as important. How do we do this middle part? How do we give an answer? Well, we do this by first, in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. And then the end, but do this with gentleness and respect. Because although we are providing a defense and perhaps offering arguments, we are not quarrelsome. So we need to know how to do this with gentleness and respect. Is this gentleness and respect? I don't think so. So what does it mean, gentleness and respect? Is this what it means? I don't think so either. How about this? Yes. So what is missing in the first couple of pictures? Yeah. This one, they're actually talking and listening, and they're having a relationship. So we want to talk about what makes this different than the first two pictures. And as I mentioned, we're going to discuss this gentleness and respect. The Greek word used that is translated to gentleness here is a word that means meekness or power under control. So gentleness does not mean that you're just a doormat or that you're just a victim, that you're just silent. That's not what gentleness means. Gentleness means you have power, but it is under control. And that first picture that you saw, where they're fighting and they're struggling and they're becoming violent and angry, they are not demonstrating power under control. Maybe power, but definitely not under control. So we want to be able to make sure that we are always self-controlled, and of course, most importantly, being controlled by the Spirit. But this word respect, this word that has been translated in English to respect, in the Greek means this fear or a reverence. Now, why do we want to do this with a fear or reverence? I would submit to you it's because we have been charged as Christians to be ambassadors for Christ. So if we are going to be ambassadors for God, representing Him to other people, we better do it well, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about this, what this means. So when we're answering people's questions, here's a list of do's and don'ts. Now, I have found that as a lawyer, people like to have a list of do's and don'ts, and Christians are no different. We like to have a list of do's and don'ts. So I threw a few in here for you. Don't just lecture or sermonize. Don't just come out and just tell people what to do. First of all, people learn more by catching what you do than by what you say to them. So we learn more by observing how people behave than from what they actually tell us. I was just sharing with someone that they ought to take their children along with them to work. I have done that. I took my daughter to law school with me. She went to classes with me. And now she was a very bright student. Now she's very serious about her work as a reporter in Las Vegas. That's because I didn't just tell her how to be a good student or how to treat her studies seriously, but I showed her because I was an example. So we want to just do more than lecture and sermonize. We don't want to raise our voice. We don't want to act superior, and we don't want to act like a bully, and we don't want to get angry. Now, that's not to say that we don't sometimes get into conversations where we get a little passionate or we get just very animated. My husband and I are two different personality types. He's much more quiet. I call him my professional extrovert because at home he's actually very quiet and very private, not to mention he has a hearing problem so he can't hear me very well, but he's a very private, quiet person. I, on the other hand, have a theater background. I'm very animated. I'm very passionate. And so I can get very excited as I'm just describing things, and he can just say, oh, just calm down a little bit. So I need to calm down a little bit for him to be able to hear me. So that's not what I'm talking about necessarily, getting passionate and animate. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But you want to be able to pay attention to your listener, to find out what it is they need for you to be able to communicate what you would like for them to hear. We'll talk about that in a minute. Respond winsomely to their questions. And also respond peacefully to conflict. Boy, I wish I had time to talk with you about that because I do a lot of teaching on resolving conflict peacefully back in America. Expose flawed assumptions and hidden contradictions. I think you kind of saw a great example of that with Dr. Howe this last session. Just hearing right out of the mouths of Benny Hinn and Paul and Jan Crouch, some just extraordinary things, and you just see the contradictions. And I always use gentleness and respect. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about tactics. Do you know this word tactics? This is methods or a strategy on how to talk to people about what you believe. It's a very effective way of communicating. There's a great book by this name, Tactics, by Greg Koukl. And if you have an opportunity to see it, it might be available on Kindle, I'm not sure. But it goes through many different types of tactics. I don't have time to explore them all today. I'm only going to share with you one that I happen to enjoy the most, and you'll see why I enjoy it so much. But I alluded to this verse a little bit earlier from Colossians 4:6. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned, as it were, with salt, so that you may know how you should respond to each person. So as we're talking to people and giving them answers and reasons for why we believe, we want to remember this, that our speech should be seasoned with salt. What does this mean? Well, think about it. When you put salt on your food, what does it do? Well, it tastes better, for one thing, doesn't it? So it enhances the flavor. So your speech should be enhancing the other person, okay? Number one. Number two, it also is a preservative. We put it on our meats, maybe our pork. We put a lot of salt on it, and it becomes bacon, right? You have bacon. It's a preservative. So salt is not only a flavor enhancer, it's a preservative. So you want to preserve people and enhance them with your speech. We don't want to destroy them or to make people feel bad. Now, that's not to say that sometimes when you confront somebody with the truth, they might feel bad initially in order to get to the truth and to be set free. But you notice at the very end is so that you know how to respond to each person. So if you just develop one style of talking to people, I might be talking to one person, be very excited and very animated and passionate, and then I go talk to my husband. He's like, whoa, calm down. So I need to know what the listener, the person who I'm talking to, what is going to be the best way of communicating with them. I'll give you a real quick example. My very first mediation that I did back in Iowa when I started practicing law and doing mediation, there was a woman in the room, and she got so upset. She was so angry, she almost started throwing things. This was a husband and wife dispute, and I was mediating a problem between them. And she became very upset, very angry. My staff was alarmed. They almost called the police because she was starting to get out of control. And so do you know what I did? I leaned back very casually in my chair. I slumped down, really relaxed, let my arms go limp. And I started speaking very slowly, and very quietly, and very calmly. And you know, she has mirror neurons like you all do in your brain. Before she knew it, she was mirroring my behavior, and she calmed down. I didn't even have to say anything. I didn't have to tell her to calm down. I didn't have to ask for her to calm down. I sure didn't have to call the police. I just met the needs of the moment. So you want to be able to respond to each person according to their needs. That means you have to pay attention. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so I talked about being an ambassador. We want to be an ambassador. This is what we are doing. We are showing people Christ. That's what our job is as Christians. We are Christ followers, and we are pointing other people to Christ. We have been designated ambassadors, which I will cite to the verse in just a minute. This particular picture is Chris Stevens. He was an ambassador to Libya. And I don't know if you remember hearing that terrible tragedy that happened in 2012 in Benghazi. I think they made a movie of it. I was asking my husband, what was the name of that movie called 13 Hours? I don't know if you saw that, but from what I understand, it's a pretty accurate depiction of what took place. It was just an assault on the American embassy, and he died. He died trying to bring peace to that region. He was an ambassador from the United States to Libya. We are ambassadors for Christ. So he was representing America to Libya, trying to bring peace. We are representing God to the world, to the lost, to try to bring them to God, the peace of God, the reconciliation with God. So we are ambassadors. So what does that mean? Well, Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians, All this is from God who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us this ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting people's sins against them, and he has committed to us this message of reconciliation. We are, therefore, Christ's ambassadors, as though God, who were making his appeal through us, we implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. That is what we are doing when we are doing apologetics. We are explaining to people why we believe Christianity is true. Now, we cannot argue people into the kingdom of heaven. Apologetics doesn't save anyone. But what it does do is help to remove those intellectual obstacles that are standing in the way so that people are left without excuse. They are faced with the truth, and they have to make a decision whether to accept God or to reject him. Something that Mike alluded to a little bit earlier, that in God's mercy sometimes, maybe he is shielding us a little bit, those unbelievers, from the truth, because we are held accountable then for what we know. So we want to help people clear away those intellectual obstacles to get to the heart of the matter. So they're left to say, wow, this is true. Now what am I going to do with this truth? I either have to accept or reject it. And they're left without excuse. If we are an ambassador for Christ, what does that look like for us? What is an ambassador's role? Well, I would submit to you that an ambassador needs 3 skills: knowledge, wisdom, and character. Knowledge is what you have been getting here today. Information about the occult, information about New Age, information about the resurrection and why we can trust it and why the Gospels are true. Information, this is knowledge. Knowledge is based on truth supported by evidence. That's how we know it. That's how you know something. You can know God. You can know the Bible's true. You can know Jesus rose from the dead. These are things you can know because it's true and it's supported by evidence. So we need this body of knowledge. And as Mike said, yeah, it's hard work to study. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing apologetics? I already had a career as a lawyer and as a judge. And by the way, we don't become lawyers in the U.S. with a bachelor's degree. We are JDs. We have a Juris Doctor degree to become a lawyer in the U.S. So it's an advanced degree. It is a professional practicing doctor degree. But why did I decide to now go study formally apologetics? Well, my husband's been doing apologetics for a long, long, long time. I don't know, 40-some years, John? A long time. And as I would go to these conferences with him, I would speak on a variety of issues: spiritual warfare, prayer, different issues, maybe issues for women or dealing with the original curses in the garden, things like that. But inevitably, women would come up and ask me questions after they would hear the speakers talking. And I thought, why are the women coming and asking me questions? I think it's because women have a different voice in this. We just have a different way of presenting the same message, but we just present it a little bit differently. And so I started asking, where are the women who are sharing this message of apologetics? And we have some in America, but I think we need more. So we've started an organization called Women in Apologetics. You can find our website, www.womeninapologetics.com. And we've just had our first apologetics conference. We incorporated things like worship into our apologetics conference so that women can come and worship with their heart and their body and their soul and their mind as well. So we need more women who are studying apologetics. Plus, women have a tremendous influence on other women and children. They're the primary caregivers, often in most families. And so women have a unique role. And I think that we can really talk to our children and to other women around us about why we believe Christianity is true. And remember, I talked earlier about not being ruled by our emotions. So we can actually have an intelligent conversation and speak logically so that we can think through these very serious and sometimes disturbing issues. So knowledge is important, but we need more than just information. Information is what I would kind of call the science. It's the knowledge, it's the information. But then you get to the wisdom, and that's more the art. So wisdom is now how to speak and what to say in that moment. Because you might train and have a whole bunch of information, and I start talking to somebody about a question or an objection they have to Christianity, and I need to have the wisdom to know their objection is not really the question they're asking. It might be something much deeper. So if I have the wisdom, I know how to probe deeper to find out what's really going on underneath. What's really the question behind the question that they're asking. That's where we want to get. And the third is character, which is kind of what the overall presentation that I'm talking about today is, gentleness and respect. How to do this in a winsome manner. I know some people in America that don't like apologetics because they have met some uncharacteristic, no, that's not a good word for it either. I'll just say it, unlikable. Let me just be frank. Unlikable people who come and they argue Christianity in a way that is intimidating and argumentative and quarrelsome and almost bullying. Well, their message might be true, that Christianity is true, but they've now turned me off from the message because of their method, because of their tactic. Does that make sense? So we want to be winsome in how we talk to people. Jesus was winsome. That doesn't mean he was passive all the time. He became very animated and passionate at times too, even angry as he overturned the money changers' tables. So there's a time and a place for that kind of passion, but that has a good purpose at the end. I'm only going to talk about one technique here, one tactic, one strategy today, but this book, Tactics, has a whole bunch of different tactics for being able to answer people's questions. This is my favorite. It's called the Columbo tactic. I don't know if you've ever heard of Columbo. Back in the U.S., it was a TV show, and this is Peter Falk. He played this detective who's kind of this bumbling guy, always kind of mumbling and clumsy and kind of stumbling onto the truth. But what he did was ask good questions. And that's what you want to do. If you want to learn how to share your faith with other people and answer their questions, learn to ask them questions. So if there's a professor in class who says to a university, in front of a whole class of university students, don't believe the Bible, it's just a bunch of fairy tales, you can say, well, how did you get to that conclusion? How did you come to believe that? Learn how to ask good questions. And I'll share some questions in just a moment. But if you learn to ask good questions, a couple things happen. One, you don't have to feel intimidated that you may not have all the answers right away, especially if you just are starting out studying and learning the scriptures. There is a starting point. Ask questions so that you can learn. So you don't have to immediately just tell people information, but you can ask them questions. Someone says, well, I don't believe all that's true. Well, why is that? Well, because I think the Bible's been corrupted over the years. Why do you think the Bible has been corrupted over the years? Well, you have all these translations. Really? Are you an expert in textual criticism? Have you studied this area? Well, no. Well, then why are you bothered by these different translations? What about that? So you ask questions to peel back the layers so that you don't have to immediately have an answer because, here we go. They taught me what to do. Come over and grab the microphone just in case my head mic goes out. Here we go for the recording. So you can ask questions to draw out the real objections and also to point out their inaccuracies and how they don't have information that is grounded on solid evidence. And so you can do that very gently by just asking questions. I was in a conversation once when I was in law school with a gal who is part of the Wiccan group. So she's a witch. And so I was asking her a little bit about her beliefs, because I'd never met a witch before. I had heard about what they believed, but instead of me going up to her and just pointing out all the errors in her beliefs, I engaged her and asked her questions. Number one, I got to know what she really believed. And number two, it started to build a relationship because she thought that I was interested in what she had to say. So she was sharing with me about the different things that she believes and how God is in everything and God, everything's alive. And so they believe, and I said, so you believe life is important? Oh, yes. We believe in protecting the trees and God is in everything. And so all life is important and you want to protect it. Yes, we do. And I said, so you stand up for protecting the unborn? Well, no, she was for abortion. I said, wait a minute, I don't understand. I thought you were for life. Well, yeah, but I believe in a woman's right to choose. I said, well, to choose what? See how I'm asking questions? What are you choosing to do? Choosing to kill a life, to terminate a life? Well, we shouldn't legislate morality, this gal is telling me. Okay, so if we shouldn't legislate morality, are you saying that it would be okay if I had a 2-year-old next to me and that we could terminate that child's life? Well, no. Well, why? So I'm asking why. Do you see how I'm pointing out the contradictions in her beliefs? I'm exposing the own contradictions in her beliefs by just asking her questions. So this is one of the best techniques that you can use. It's very disarming, as opposed to just telling somebody what to do. This is very hard for me to do personally, and this is probably why I focus on this one so much. Why? Because I'm a lawyer. People pay me to solve their problems. I'm used to just telling people what they need to do. You come to me, you hire me to solve your problems, and I tell you what we need to do. I'm a teller. I love to tell people. I was a storyteller growing up. My sisters, my 2 younger sisters, didn't like to read. I was an avid reader. I would tell them the stories that I read, so I became a very good storyteller. So I love to talk, I love to tell people, so if someone's wrong, I want to tell them why they're wrong. I want to tell them what they need to believe that's right. Well, when I started studying mediation, I realized that to be an effective mediator, I needed to ask good questions. And I needed to lead people to the truth versus me telling them the truth, that they would discover it for themselves, and then it would be much more powerful. Do you remember the story of David and Bathsheba? And David was sinning with Bathsheba. And Nathan was charged to go and confront David about his sin. And he told David a story, and David got all upset. And at the end he said, "You're the man." Then he realized, he personalized it, and he made the connection on his own. So you see, we can help people to see the truth, help to lead them to the truth without always telling them. Now, part of the purpose of this conference is to give you information. We're not sitting down having a wonderful dialogue one-on-one, although I'd love to sit down and talk with each of you, but we don't have the time to permit that. So we just give you a lot of information. But as you're talking to people one-on-one, whether it's with a family member or someone who you're going to school with, or maybe it's someone even in the church who sits next to you and even has questions about what they believe, you'll be able to help them by asking them questions. You know, if there's one thing I'm sad to say as I travel around the world, I have been approached by many women, many who are pastors' wives or elders' wives or just church leaders, women who are church leaders, and they have come up to me and asked me questions privately. How do I know Jesus is really the only way? And what about the people who never hear about Jesus? Are they going to hell? The point I'm making is people in church, even leaders or wives of leaders, they have questions too. And so we want to be able to answer these questions and do it in a winsome way. And do it in a way that we can even help them to discover the truth and the answers by us asking really good questions. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of these good questions here. Here we go. What do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? Or have you ever considered? Those are just a few. This book does have a few more examples. I can see I need to wrap up my time here, so let me just quickly get here to the end. Hugh Hewitt was my constitutional law professor in law school, and he said this: "It is not the Christian life to wound, embarrass, or play one-upsmanship with colleagues, friends, or even opponents. But it's a common vice that anyone can easily fall into. As we gather more knowledge, knowledge can puff up. We don't want to become puffed up because in the end, what matters? Love. And that's what the gentleness and respect demonstrates is God's love. So we want to remember this when we're sharing our answers with people. And to always be innocent, but to be shrewd, right? Be as wise as serpents, but as innocent as doves. So be wise. Don't be foolish, but be innocent. Be gentle. Be meek. Be power under control. And just one final word. Don't make a frontal assault on a superior force. My husband told you he debated an imam, a Muslim imam in Nigeria. I'm not going to go do that. That's not my area of expertise. I've been hired to create some classes for a Christian law school back in the US, and I just got my contract while I was here and I was reviewing it. And the class they wanted me to create is for genocide in the law. And I said, I'm not a subject matter expert in this genocide in the law. I've never taught on this. I don't know anything about this. I think there must be an error in the title of my course. So I responded to them. They said, yes, there is an error. That's not the right course. So I would have taken on too much. That would have been too much. I'm not an expert in that area. I have expertise in other areas. So don't take on more than you can chew. Don't get involved in a formalized debate with someone unless you are prepared. John can tell you the countless hours, the years of experience that he has had that enabled him to be able to do that. You can follow us, as I mentioned before, a little bit on our website, Intelligent Faith. And I put up there the Women in Apologetics website as well, so you'd have that. And you can follow us on Twitter. So I hope that this has been helpful as you learn how to give answers to other people with gentleness and respect, to go out and be an ambassador, do it with power under control, and do it with fear and reverence because you are representing the Lord. And remember to ask good questions. Thank you.